Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. The Bhagavatam? Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 9, Text 12. On the board?
Yeah.
Te na smaranti atitaram priyam isha martyam ye cha anu ada sutta suhrit griha vita dara ye tu abjanaba bhavadiya pararavinda saugandhya lubda hridayeshu krita prasanga tena smarantya titaram priyamisha matyam. The word missing?
Between Smaranti and Priyam, there's a word there. I think it's missing.
Yeah, atitaram. Not there.
Throwing people off.
Okay, there's a word atitaram in between. Atitaram, Smaranti and Priyam.
I consider God as conscious, and I was trying to adjust it so that the microphone is not directly in the line of Maharaj's from the recording, right? See if we can do it a little bit.
Why is it there?
If you go a little bit closer, yeah, that way it would not be blocking.
Don't be shy bringing it.
Yeah, certainly.
You can sit there if you'd like to. Direct it.
Tena smarantya titaram priyamisha martyam. Ye chanvada sutta suhrid griha vittadara. Ye tvabjanaba bhavadiya padara vinda. Saugandhya lubda hridayeshu krita prasanga. Tena smarantya titaram priyamisha matyam. Ye chanvada sutta suhrid griha vittadara. Ye tvabjanaba bhavadiya padara vinda. Saugandhya lubda hridayeshu krita prasanga. Tena smarantya titaram priyamisha matyam. Ye chanvada sutta suhrid griha vittadara. Ye tvabjanaba bhavadiya padaravinda. Saugandhya lubda hridayeshu krita prasanga.
Ye Chandada Sutta Surit Griha Vitadara.
Ye Chandada Sutta Surit Griha Vitadara.
Ye Tvajjanava Pavadiya Padara Vinda.
Ye Tvajjanava Pavadiya Padara Vinda.
Saugandhya Lubda Hridayeshu Krita Prasayam.
Saugandhya Lubda Hridayeshu Krita Prasayam.
Tena smarantyatitaram priyamisamartyam.
Tena smarantyatitaram priyamisamartyam.
Ye chandvada sutta surit griha vittadara.
Ye chandvada sutta surit griha vittadara.
Vabjanaba bhavadiya padara vinda.
Ye vabjanaba bhavadiya padara vinda.
Saugandhya lubda hridayeshu krita prasangam.
Saugandhya lubda hridayeshu krita prasangam.
Tena smarantya-titaram priyam ishamartyam.
Tena smarantya-titaram priyam ishamartyam.
Ye chandada sutta surit griha vittadaraha.
Ye chandada sutta surit griha vittadara.
Ye tvabjanava bhavadiya padara vinda.
Ye tvabjanava bhavadiya padara vinda.
Saugandhya lubda hridayeshu krita prasangaha.
Saugandhya lubda hridayeshu krita prasangaha.
Ladies?
Tena smarati atiram priyam ishamartyam.
Tena smarantya-titaram priyam ishamartyam.
Yechan vada sutta suhit griha vittadara.
Ye chandvada sutta surit griha vittadara.
Ye tvabjanabha bhavadiya padara vinda.
Ye tvabjanava bhavadiya padara vinda.
Saugandhya lubda hridayeshu krita prasanga.
Saugandhya lubda hridayeshu krita prasanga.
Te, they, na, never, smaranti, remember, atitaram, highly, priyam, dear, isha, O Lord, martyam, material body, ye, they who, cha, also, anu, in relationship with, adaha, that, sutta, sons, suhit, friends, griha, home, vita, wealth, dara, and wife, ye, those who, to, then, abjanaba, O Lord, who have a lotus navel, bhavadiya, of your, pada aravinda, lotus feet, saugandhya, the fragrance, lubda, have achieved, hridayeshu, with devotees whose hearts, krita prasanga, have association. Translation. O Lord, who have a navel, if a person happens to associate with a devotee whose heart always hankers after your lotus feet, seeking always their fragrance, he is never attached to the material body or in a bodily relationship to offspring, friends, home, wealth, and wife, which are very, very dear to materialistic persons. Indeed, he does not care for them. Purport. A special advantage in devotional service is that devotees not only enjoy the transcendental pastimes of the Lord by hearing and chanting and glorifying them, but also are not very much attached to their bodies, unlike the yogis who are too attached to the body and who think that by performing bodily gymnastic exercises they will advance in spiritual consciousness. Yogis are generally not very much interested in devotional service. They want to regulate the breathing process. This is simply a bodily concern. Here Dhruva Maharaj plainly says that a devotee has no more bodily interest. He knows that he is not the body. From the very beginning, therefore, without wasting time in bodily exercises, devotee searches out a pure devotee, and simply by his association becomes more advanced in spiritual consciousness than any yogi. Because a devotee knows that he is not the body, he is never affected by bodily happiness or distress. He is not interested in bodily relationships with wife, children, home, bank balance, etc., or in the distress and happiness which come from these things. This is the special advantage of being a devotee. The status of life is possible only when a person is interested in associating with a pure devotee who always enjoys the fragrance of the lotus feet of the Lord. Translation again. O Lord, who have a lotus navel, if a person happens to associate with a devotee whose heart always hankers after your lotus feet, seeking always their fragrance, he is never attached to the material body or in a bodily relationship to offspring, friends, home, wealth, and wife, which are very, very dear to materialistic persons. Indeed, he does not care for them. Om Agyanantimarandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshu Unminitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Pukuroti Vachalam Pangum Mangayate Garin Yat Kripata Maham Vande Shri Gunandina Dharanam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Saman Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shanyavari Pastatya Desatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sri Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Continuation of Dhruva Maharaj's prayer, which we discussed yesterday about his request to the Lord to please give him always the association of devotees. Specifically said to bless me so that I may associate with devotees who are always constantly engaged in your service. I was thinking today when I was looking at this verse that there was a time, I'm sure maybe some of you will remember, back in the 70s when we would read a verse like this and everybody, the speaker, sometimes in a spirit of fanaticism, would spend the whole time denouncing household life. And that would be Srimad Bhagavatam class. You remember?
I remember once giving such a hardcore class that one of the ladies was crying at the back. I was bewildered. I was
deep dark well.
I looked at it, I said, wow, I hope things have changed.
Out of the deep dark well.
Yeah, those great verses, Griha Andakupam, Prahlad Maharaj speaking to Hiranyakashipu about the deep dark well of material existence. Of course,
It can be.
Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur does give a nice analogy about that well. But we won't start with that.
Keep the best for last.
It's ironic that sannyasis we talked about also like.
No, they wouldn't. They would just condemn it.
With no experience.
But actually, by good fortune, and certainly by association with devotees, and by studying Srila Prabhupada's commentaries taken in context, not simply extracting, the you should be detached Prabhu's type of spirit. And usually the people who usually take that you should be detached Prabhu's spirit are the ones who usually end up getting married anyways. But fortunately, taken in context and studying the commentaries of our previous acharyas, we could understand that attachment is not something that we should try to attempt to kill artificially. I mean, that's the actual essence of our Krishna consciousness philosophy, because attachment is natural. And to try to kill it artificially is false renunciation. And such false renunciation does not lead to attachment to the lotus feet of the Lord. Such false renunciation can make one's heart hard. Prabhupada speaks about that in the Nectar Devotion and other places as well, that artificial renunciation makes the heart hard. It makes the heart hard because a devotee knows that to the degree that one becomes attached to Krishna, to that degree, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janayat Yashu Vairagyam Gyanam Chayadahaitukam, that by rendering devotional service to the Supreme Lord, then by developing attachment to that devotional service to the Lord, beginning with Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, then one automatically acquires both knowledge and detachment from the material world. It comes as a secondary, extraneous benefit. Prabhupada used to always quote the verse, Savapadavinya Muktam Tatpadadvena Nirmalam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakya Uchate, that when one engages in devotional service to the Supreme Lord Rishikesh, who is the master of the senses, then two byproducts will manifest. One of them is that Savapadavinya Muktam, that one will become freed from all designations. Right? He becomes free. These things gradually become washed away. And these designations are embedded quite deeply since time immemorial. So to try to artificially remove these designations is not the recommended process. But gradually, by increasing one's attachment to the service of the Lord, Supreme Lord Rishikesh, by engaging one's senses and rendering service to the Lord, then Savapadavinya Muktam. Then not only does one become freed gradually from material designations, but then his senses become controlled. We oftentimes quote that verse, Prabodhananda Saraswati Kaivalya Narakayate Tridasa Purokasha Pushpayate. He says, for anyone who's received that merciful glance of Lord Chaitanya, then simply by getting that merciful glance of Lord Chaitanya, then the concept of Kaivalya, or impersonal liberation, for him it's like going to hell. He has no interest in it. Tridasa Purokasha Pushpa, the heavenly planets, they become like phantasmagoria. He's not interested in those either. And the venomous serpents of the senses become like serpents with broken fangs. They no longer have any poisonous effect. Vishram Purna Sukhayate. Everyone becomes naturally joyful. And the positions, getting a position of elevated positions of demigods like Indra and the heavenly planets, that position is like having a position of an insignificant insect. This is a result of Lord Chaitanya's merciful glance, which Prabodhananda Saraswati also indicates in this verse, that Lord Chaitanya is very merciful, and that Lord Chaitanya is so kind that he... Is there translation going on?
Yes.
Okay, I was just wondering.
I don't speak
No, it's okay. I just didn't think. I'm quite used to it. I usually hear Russian going on in the background, and I was thinking, who here doesn't? But it's French, huh? Okay. I'm not distracted at all. I'm very used to it. In fact, I'm used to having somebody sit next to me and translate sentence by sentence. I'm not used to speaking continuously in English. Okay. I'll try to speak slower. No. You okay?
The flow is well.
Okay. All right. Yes, Lord Chaitanya is so merciful that he takes the first step. He gives even to those who are most unqualified an opportunity to become attached to Krishna. And therefore, although persons who may be addicted to all kinds of sinful activities may have no inclination whatsoever for devotional service, as Prahlad Maharaj himself says, Matir na Krishne paratak svatova mito bipadyeta griha bratanam adanta gobya vishitam tamisham punak punaschava tachavananam. He describes that materialistic persons who are deeply embedded in the materialistic concept of life, that they make progress towards hellish conditions of life, and they repeatedly chew that which has already been chewed. Their inclinations towards Krishna can never be aroused, either by their own efforts or by the efforts of others. So, yes, there are materialistic persons whose inclinations towards Krishna can never be aroused. Their attachments are so deeply embedded, and when they hear the topics of the Supreme Lord, or whether they receive the merciful glance of the devotee of the Lord, or they somehow even Agyata Sukriti, they come in contact with the holy name of the Lord, sometimes we see that such persons may show no inclination towards spiritual life. Still, by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, even persons who are addicted to sinful life, their lives can immediately change, simply by being given an opportunity to come in contact with the devotee of the Lord. This is tulayama lavena pinasvagam napuna bhavam, that the value of association with a devotee of the Lord, one moment association with a devotee of the Lord, cannot be compared to elevation to the heavenly planets, to result in good birth, resultant birth, or liberation, or for material prosperity, which is ultimately meant for those who are meant for death. But Bhagavatam has a different standard. That the standard of Srimad Bhagavatam is that if one gets the association or opportunity to associate with a devotee, then one moment association with a devotee can immediately change everything. Right? What is that other verse in Bhagavatam that what is the value of prolonged life, which is wasted by years in this world? Better one moment of full consciousness, because that will enable one to search after his ultimate interest. One moment. Right? And Prabhupada speaks about in the purport that sometimes people, they put great emphasis on how to prolong, extend life. But we see trees live there for hundreds of years, but what is the value of their life? You know, they have no value and significant value towards spiritual value, but their value is just how to prolong life for enjoying the material world, or for avoiding suffering, which is how most materialistic people, they organize their life to enjoy the world and to avoid suffering. And Prahlad Maharaj says, in this material world, every materialist is endeavoring for happiness, and he's trying to mitigate his distress, and therefore he's acting accordingly. Actually, however, one cannot be happy as long as one endeavors for happiness, because as soon as he begins his endeavors for happiness, he creates all his conditions for future distress. Doesn't see it. And therefore, he lives a life of sense enjoyment, and therefore his values in life are how to live as long as possible and enjoy as long as possible, and how to protect my attachments. And because these attachments are my source of satisfaction, my source of happiness. But he lives with so much anxiety because of those attachments. Why? Because attachment is natural, as we said in the beginning. But attachment to what? Right. If we become attached to the material world, and Krishna in many places gives us evidence that you go from the highest planet to the lowest planet, all the places of repeated birth and death. If you become attached to the material world, then you'll have to stay in the material world. But one who attains to my abode, he never takes birth again. The result of becoming attached to the devotee of the Lord, as we explained yesterday, is that the genuine benefit of becoming attached to a devotee is that one becomes attached to the Lord. Devotee has that capacity. Shusho Shranadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punyatirtha Nashevanat. Bhagavatam first canto states that by serving those devotees who are freed from vice, great service is done by that service. What happens? One gets attachment from hearing and chanting about Krishna. Yeah. Vasudeva Kataruchi, he attains a taste from attraction, from attachment from hearing and chanting about Krishna. That's the value of associating with a devotee. Unsuspectingly. We don't understand how it happened. Unsuspectingly, by association, just simply by becoming a little bit attached to that devotee, then what happens? And I oftentimes I revel, and I really appreciate. And when I spoke about this last time about reading the early days, and Prabhupada first came to New York, and how the devotees, their attachment was to Prabhupada. And not only, but they were just, because Prabhupada was just, for them, was just like a genuine person. He just walked his talk. He did everything that he said he spoke about, he did. And because he just displayed attachment to Krishna, he displayed detachment from worldly things. Just simply by seeing him, devotees became attached to want to serve him. And unknowingly, I was just recently when I was with Mukunda Maharaj, because I went and visited Mukunda Maharaj in Australia. I was telling him how, after reading Miracle on 2nd Avenue and reading some of the books in the early days of the devotees' topic, especially the early devotees, how they came to Krishna consciousness, I was saying that it almost seemed like that many devotees, they're unsuspecting, unknowingly, they came to Krishna consciousness. It wasn't like a deliberate effort to come to Krishna consciousness. It's just they got caught. They got trapped. some people say, well, Prabhupada was an expert cheater. Krishna's an expert cheater. We talked about that yesterday also. How we get cheated into doing some devotional service, thinking, I'm going to get some benefit out of it. But the result is that actually we think that I'm going to enjoy, I'm going to extract what I have, but somehow, like what's that little play about the thief, wanted to steal Krishna's jewels, right? One party I remember in Russia, he performed this play. It was so beautiful, it brought tears to everybody's eyes. About the thief who wanted to steal Krishna's jewels, and he had this whole plot, and he came in the association, and all his, he's just totally absorbed in stealing Krishna's jewels. But by being in Krishna's association, he became so attached to Krishna that he gave up his interest in stealing Krishna's jewels. So, same way, when we come in the association of devotees, then what happens? Lord says that engaged constantly in hearing and chanting about me, devotees who have some attachment, as it's described here, they relish that what is it? Who always hanker after your lotus feet, seeking always their fragrance, as Dhruva Maharaj is saying. They relish that hankering after the lotus feet of the Lord. They relish discussions and topics about the Lord. Bhagavatam says that the topmost transcendentalists, where do they get their nectar? Where do they get their pleasure? They get their pleasure from talking to Krishna. That's where they get their happiness. And because they get some happiness, and because they enjoy that natural spiritual satisfaction which comes from such transcendental topics, the result is that it's infectious. Others become attracted. So Lord Kapila Dev says, that engaged constantly in hearing and chanting about me, such devotees who are going after that, they don't suffer from material miseries because they're always filled with thoughts of my activities and pastimes. Okay, someone will say, wait a minute, you're going to tell me they don't suffer from material miseries? But the point is that they don't become absorbed in them. They don't become absorbed in them. These material miseries, they come and go, they have a beginning and an end. They're more absorbed. They're more absorbed. And there's an important point that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur brings out in this connection of how they are more absorbed. They're more dependent on hearing and chanting about Krishna. What Bhagavatam, Lord Brahma says, first we oftentimes quote, Prabhupada would quote, Tate no kampam shamano bhujani ivatma kritam vipakam vidvag vapabhirvananam namaste jivekta yomukti pude sadhaya bhak. That one who seeks your compassion tolerates all kinds of adverse conditions to his past misdeeds, but he goes on glorifying you with his body and mind and words, engaging in devotional service, then mukti padeh sadhaya bhak. For him, it's his rightful claim, liberation. Daya bhak, rightful claim means if somebody gets an inheritance, it's their rightful claim. So in the same way, the liberation from this material world, or real liberation, is to be engaged fully in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord. That is real liberation. Iha yasya hare dashe kamana manasagara nikalavapyavastasu jiva muktasu uchite. For anyone who's fully engaged in hearing and chanting about the glories of the Lord, he's already a liberated soul, even while he's in the body. So, Lord Kapila Dev says, if you somehow you become attached to such devotees who have some attachment, then what does he say next? Ta'ete saravasa disava sangha vivajata sangaste shvatate pratya sangha dosha harahite. O my mother, O virtuous lady, you seek out association with devotees who have some attachment to Krishna, and become attached to them. Prasangam ajaram pasamatmano kavayovidu. Every learned person knows that attachment to material things is the cause of bondage for the living entity. But when the same attachment is applied to self-realized devotees, moksha dvaram upavrita, then the gate for liberation, it's opened. Become attached. Nothing. Lord Kapila doesn't say, "Oh, mother, what are you doing? All your attachments." That's not his process. It's not his process. His process is describing the glories of devotional service to his mother. His process is become attached to those who have attachment to Krishna. And when you become attached to those who have attachment to Krishna, what happens? Counteracts the pernicious effects of material attachment. That's how this is what happened. Unknowingly. Somehow it manifests without any extraneous effort. It comes without any extraneous effort, simply by giving the ears. That's why Lord Kapila Dev also says, when we quoted yesterday the verse, it's the easiest process of mystic yoga. It's the easiest. All you have to do is give your ears. Satam prasangam amaviri samvado bhavanti hrikana rasaya nakata. Just give your ears. Anyone can give the ears. Of course, except sometimes it's very difficult. Who is it? Sukadeva Goswami says, except one who's a butcher or who's killing Atma, he kills himself. Sometimes it's difficult for them. What is that verse? Help me. Huh? Nivitatashu upagiyamanat. Yes. That the transmission of transcendental knowledge from the spiritual master to disciple, it happens. And there's one, here is this transcendental topics, then what happens is he becomes awakened. So who will fail to hear such transcendental topics except one who's a butcher or one who's killing himself? They may not be actually be able to awaken any attachment. But if we somehow become attached, then, as Lord Kapila Dev says, it will counteract the pernicious effects of material attachment. So this is the process of becoming detached, is simply by increasing one's attachment to the association of devotees who speak about the Lord, and by increasing one's attachment to hearing about the Lord. And as I said before, I wanted to read, it's an interesting verse, so we oftentimes quote it. It's Krishna to Uddhava in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam. And this verse Jatashradu, what is it? Jatashradu. Yes. Jatashradu matkatasu nirvanav sarvakamasu veda dukatmakam kaman paratyage panishvara. So the verse, having developed faith in topics about me, being disgusted with all karmas. This is Banu Maharaj's translation. Being disgusted with all, because it's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary I'm going to read. Being disgusted with all karmas, a devotee knows that all enjoyments are filled with misery, but he's unable to give them up. Still with affection for me, with faith and determination, he will continue worshipping me, while at the same time partaking of those enjoyments which give rise to suffering, and yet condemning them. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary of this verse, he explains that these two verses, Krishna speaks of the beginning, or the initial state of a person qualified for bhakti. This is where bhakti begins. Right? It begins when one, or as we quoted before, Satam Prasangam Amavirya Sampado Bhavanti Hritkanya Dasayana Kata. Devotional service begins. Right? That's the Lord Kapila Dev, that hearing in the association of pure devotees, in the association of devotees, discussions of the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are very pleasing to the ear. They enter the ear and they go to the heart. As one begins to hear these topics, then gradually what happens is he becomes detached He advances on this path of knowledge, he becomes detached, his attachment to Krishna then begins, and then real devotion and devotional service can begin. Right? It's the beginning. It's where it begins. Shraddha, having faith, having awakened faith in the narrations of my glories, as Krishna says to Uddhava. Having awakened faith in hearing about me. Then what happens? When one has awakened this faith, we also oftentimes use that analogy about faith, Shraddha, the awakening of faith. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the analogy he uses is like Shraddha, the awakening of faith, is like the birth of a newborn baby. Is when a newborn baby takes its birth, and then requires to be protected from heat and cold, from hunger and thirst, from dangerous creatures, and it needs to be nourished. And he gives this analogy to like the birth of Shraddha, which is the birth of faith in the heart of a living entity. That birth of faith is awakened, or takes birth, in the association of devotees. And when it takes its birth, Brahmanda Brahmate Gonda Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasati Pai Bhakti Lata Beach, when it takes its birth, then it requires nourishment in the form of continuous hearing. And not only does it require nourishment in the form of continuous hearing, but it also requires protection from the guardians of devotional service. Protection from karma and tendencies towards karma and jnana, protections towards worldly attachments. And in this way, he compares the birth of Shraddha to be like this birth of a newborn baby. Protection is there, and nourishment is required, and the more the nourishment is there, the baby gets stronger, and as the baby gets stronger, then the more the baby is able to resist the influence of these dangerous elements by increasing strength. In fact, this brings to mind, I'll get to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, it's good, but it brings to mind another very wonderful quote from Prabhupada. I hope I can find it, but if my Evernote works properly. Yes. There's a wonderful quote that Prabhupada gives in the third canto of the Bhagavatam. It's a paraphrase of the verses that Lord Chaitanya spoke to Rupa Goswami about the Bhakti Lata Beach. And when Rupa Goswami, Lord Chaitanya is giving the instructions about that when the Bhakti Lata Bij is planted in the heart and it requires to be watered, and then one has to be careful to protect the plant from the influence of weeds, and then he describes how the plant grows, and these verses from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada paraphrased them in one purport in the third canto of the Bhagavatam. And it was a verse about, I think it was about Uddhava. How Uddhava was completely absorbed in thoughts of Krishna, and he wasn't present when Vidura came to speak. He was absorbed in thoughts of Krishna, and when Vidura came, he had to come back down to speak to Vidura. But Prabhupada in the commentary, he speaks about this phenomena of once the seed is planted and is nourished and grows. He says the living entities all over the universes are enjoying the effects of the respective fruitive results of their own work, life after life. Out of all of them, some may be influenced by the association of pure devotees, and thus get the chance to execute devotional service by attainment of taste. By attainment of taste. Then he says, this taste is the seed of devotional service. And one who is fortunate enough to have received such a seed is advised to sow it in the core of his heart. So he says that the seed is awakening of taste, right? Because everyone knows there's taste for material things and there's taste for spirit. Just an awakening of taste. That's where bhakti begins. is the awakening of some taste. Then he says, as one cultivates a seed by pouring water to fructify it, the seed of devotional service sown in the heart of the devotee may be cultured by pouring water in the form of hearing and chanting of the holy name and pastimes of the Lord. Right? The two points that Madhavananda, what would you describe them yesterday? The holy name and Srimad Bhagavatam, in reference to what? He was saying that these are always present. Secret weapons, that's right. The secret weapons. Two secret weapons. The holy name and Srimad Bhagavatam. Two secret weapons. So Prabhupada says, as one cultivates a seed by pouring water to fructify it, the seed of devotional service sown in the heart of the devotee may be cultured by pouring water in the form of hearing and chanting of the holy name and the pastimes of the Lord. The creeper of devotional service, so nourished, gradually grows, and the devotee, acting as a gardener, goes on pouring the water of constant hearing and chanting. The creeper of devotional service gradually grows so high that it passes through the entire material universe and enters into the spiritual sky, growing still higher and higher until it reaches the planet Goloka Vrindavan. The devotee gardener is in touch with the abode of the Lord, even from the material plane, by dint of performing devotional service to the Lord simply by hearing and chanting. Then this is wonderful. As a creeper takes shelter of another stronger tree, similarly, the creeper of devotional service, nourished by the devotee, takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord and thus becomes fixed. In other words, a creeper, if it doesn't have a tree to take shelter of, it's very difficult for it to. But when it finds a tree to wrap around, right? What happens? It wraps around the tree, finds a place to be situated, wrapped around this tree, becomes fixed. And what happens when the creeper becomes fixed in the tree? And he says right here, as the creeper takes shelter of another stronger tree, similarly the creeper of devotional service, nourished by the devotee, takes shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord and thus becomes fixed. When the creeper is fixed, then the fruit comes into existence. And the gardener who nourished it is able to enjoy this fruit of love, and his life becomes successful. That's Prabhupada's paraphrasing of these verses from Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's so beautiful, so poetic. When I read this, like the Prabhupada is like, he's real kavi. So, therefore, this is where it begins. Faith begins in the association of devotees. It begins in the associations of Shraddha, faith. So, therefore, now we're going back to the verse of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Jatashradu Matkatasu. He says, having awakened or having developed faith in the topics, this is not the verse, this is Krishna speaking to Uddhava. Having developed faith in topics about me and being disgusted with all karmas, a devotee knows that all enjoyments are filled with misery, but he's unable to give them up. Still with affection for me, with faith and determination, he will continue worshipping me while at the same time partaking of those enjoyments which give rise to suffering and yet condemning them. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, in these two verses, Krishna speaks of the initial state of a person qualified for bhakti. This is a qualification for bhakti. He's disgusted with the results of karma ruling Vedic rituals and ordinary life, disturbed by seeing the unhappiness it causes. In other words, he's disgusted with performing the Vedic rituals, which Krishna speaks about, Yamidam pushpatam vacham pravadyanchi vapashchata vedavada rataparta nadyadastini vadana. He speaks about the Vedic rituals. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend elevation to heavenly planets, power, result in good birth, being attached to sense gratification and opulent life. They think there's nothing more than this, right? They're attached to the Vedic rituals, although Krishna warns that all the purpose, just as all the purposes of small ponds can be served by the great reservoirs of water, similarly all the purposes of the Vedas can be understood, can be served by one who knows the purpose behind them. Right? So all the Vedic ritualistic activities, he's disgusted. He's no longer interested in simply in the execution of the Vedic ritualistic activities. He says, because he knows that these will eradicate my karma, my reaction, but it doesn't eradicate the desire to engage again in sinful activities. This is also explained in the whole story in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, in the story of Vajramil, where what is it, the verse? Tapasa brahmachayena samena cha damena cha, where it's recommended, where Shukadeva Goswami is telling Parikshit Maharaj, at first he's telling him to engage in the Vedic injunctions by counteracting one's sinful activities by engaging in atonement, and Parikshit Maharaj said, "No, atonement doesn't work. It's like the elephant who atones for the sin, but he's like the elephant who takes his bath and he goes on out after taking bath and he throws dirt all over his body again. What's the value of such atonement?" And then Shukadeva Goswami says knowledge, and then Parikshit Maharaj says, "No, that's not it either, because although one may have knowledge, he may not have attachment to the lotus feet of the Lord. And even though one may be engaged in tapasa, austerities, and celibacy, and he may engage in chanting of Vedic mantras, japa, chanting of Vedic mantras, still if he does all these things, still, the example he says, it's just like the dried roots or the dried creepers at the bottom of the tree. They may be dried up, but in due course of time, these creepers will, if the seed is still there, they will grow up again. So all of these activities, Parikshit Maharaj understood, no, that's not it. That's not it. He was looking for something more. And Lord Krishna says to Uddhava the same whole procedure in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam in his discussions to Uddhava. He explains that for those who are still addicted to fruitive activities, then the process of karma yoga is recommended. For those who are detached, simply disgusted, but they haven't awakened faith in Krishna, then jnana is recommended for them. But if by some good fortune, if one is neither too attached or too detached, if by some good fortune, what is it? It's just good fortune, that's all it is. What can we say? Good fortune. If he gets the opportunity to hear the narrations of the Lord, the association of devotees, then by that good fortune, he should engage in bhakti. Bhakti. And what is that bhakti? We said bhakti begins. A good fortune, it begins when one has awakened faith, or as Prabhupada said, attainment of taste. Gotten some taste for Krishna by the association of devotees. This is the value. This is the recommended process. And then he goes on in his commentary to explain. He said that he is disgusted with the results of karma ruling Vedic rituals in ordinary life, disturbed by seeing the unhappiness it causes. This repeats what was said earlier. He's not overly attached to karma. He knows that desires which give rise to attachment to wife and sons are filled with suffering, but he's unable to give them up. Having entered such a condition, he has resolve. Let my attachment for family be destroyed or increase. Let there be millions of obstacles to my worship, or let the obstacles be destroyed. Let me go to hell if I have committed offenses by keeping those desires, but I will not give up bhakti. I will not accept karma or jnana, even if Brahma personally comes and orders me to accept it. This is his determination. He does not have inclination to unfavorable things to the same extent that he has firm determination for bhakti, which he has just started. Oh, so clear. Right? I'll read that again. He does not have inclination to unfavorable things to the same extent that he has firm determination for bhakti, which he has just started. It started. Don't lose it. Watering has to continue. If one is not careful and doesn't continue watering, if one is not careful in a little inattentiveness, then what happens? Then, of course, Lord Chaitanya has given warnings to Rupa Goswami. The weeds can grow, and the weeds grow faster, and they can choke that devotional creeper. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we oftentimes quote that verse, Shinvatasva Kata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridantyusto Hyavadani Vidunoti Suhit Satam. That Sri Krishna, who is the super soul in the heart of every living being, he cleanses desire for material enjoyment within the heart of that person who develops the urge to hear his messages, which are themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. He develops the urge. There's some urge to hear it. He understands it's necessary. I need to take my medicine. He has an urge for it. And sometimes what happens, if devotees are not careful, they're careless, and these little weeds grow up and begin choking. Then what happens, the devotee begins to think, I'm not sure if I want to hear about these topics, because if more I hear about these topics, I have to protect these attachments in my heart. I'm afraid that's going a little bit too far. Because if I just go on hearing and become too absorbed in them, then Krishna may sneak in and take them away when I'm not looking. We become too attached to protecting them. But Krishna's done. He's Hari. He's one who steals. Like that wonderful song that Gaura Govinda Maharaj sings about. Gaura, what is it? Yeah, yeah. Krishna's the supreme thief, right? The supreme thief. He's entered into my heart. He stole everything from within my heart. He said, but what's the proper way to deal with a thief? I'm going to lock you up in the prison of my heart, and you'll never get out. Oh, supreme thief, you've taken everything away. Krishna's a thief. He takes away. Can we blame him? Shall we say, Krishna, don't take it away? Of course. Sometimes we may say that. Or sometimes we may be afraid to pray to Krishna. Krishna, like this prayer says, Krishna, let me go to hell for my attachments. I don't care if I go to hell. Let me, or what was the other things he says? He said that let my attachments for family be destroyed or increased. Let there be millions of obstacles. Let there be millions. No, we don't pray for millions of obstacles. Let there be millions of obstacles. Or take all the obstacles. Either way, I don't care. I won't give up hearing about you. I won't give it up. Nothing. Nothing will let me give up the nectar from your lotus feet. I won't give it up. That's some attachment. And when Krishna sees that there's some attachment to him in this way, what does Krishna do? Tesham nitya payuktanam yogakshema vahamyam. Right? There's that wonderful story. That wonderful story that makes me think about Srivas Thakur when Lord Chaitanya went to Srivas's house. Right? And he said to Srivas, he said, I see you're sitting here, you're not going around anywhere, you're not begging anything. But you have a big family. What are you doing to take care of your family? And Srivas said, well, these things, they'll come. In other words, Srivas, in fact, Vrindavan Das Thakur explains that Srivas and his brother, Srivas Pandit, Ramai Pandit, and all his brothers, they were just absorbed in hearing and Srimad Bhagavatam and chanting. That's it. Totally absorbed. That was their attachment. So Lord Chaitanya came and tested Srivas. He said, you're not doing anything. Why don't you make some effort? And Srivas said, no, I don't need to make any effort. But you have a big family. I've not seen anybody, just sit around and with no effort at all, and they provide for their family. What are you going to do about it? And Shiva said, well, what did he do? I think he's clapped his hands 3 times. Yes. He said, what does this mean, Shiva? He said, well, this means 1, 2, 3. He says, after 3 times, if Krishna doesn't provide, he said, I'll tie a rope around my neck and I'll drown myself in the Ganga. He says, he didn't say it exactly like that. He says, I don't care if it comes or doesn't come. But if something doesn't come, then I'll just continue and doing what I do. Or if it doesn't come, I'll tie a rope around my neck. He said, and I'll drown myself in the Ganga. And then Lord Chaitanya said, what are you saying, Srivas? Don't you know what I said in Bhagavad Gita? Tesham nityapayuktanam yogakshema vihamyaham. Even if the goddess of fortune becomes impoverished, you will never suffer miseries. Even one other place, he says, even the animals in your house, they will also be taken care of by me. He gives this insistence. And then he said, not only you, but even those who are devotees of you. Those who are devotees of you, I will personally take care of them. Many places Krishna says that. He said that to Durvasa Muni. He said that Durvasa Muni says, when he says, he said that I can't do anything. I'm not independent. I'm always dependent on my devotees. What to speak of my devotees? Those who are devotees of my devotees, I'm also completely controlled by them. So, Tesham nityapayuktanam yogakshema hamyaham. The devotee has complete faith that I will not give up hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and chanting Hare Krishna. I won't give it up. So, that is what Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is explaining here. The devotee is one who has awakened that faith. That faith. Shraddha. Faith in bhakti. Not faith in karma, not faith in jnana, but faith in bhakti. And bhakti is hearing and chanting about the glories and pastimes and personality of Godhead and the association of devotees. Becoming attached to it. That's all. Just awakening attachment. Without unknowingly, it can happen. If we get the opportunity to associate with devotees. Unknowingly it can happen. And when it happens, when that attachment is, a taste is awakened, then we go on watering with the process of hearing and chanting. And as Prabhupada so wonderfully described, that the result of that watering is that gradually one makes progress, his devotional creeper grows, and his attachment to hearing the pastimes and glories of the Lord increases, and then the devotional creeper goes into the transcendental realm, takes shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna, and then produces the fruit of love of Godhead, and one is able to enjoy that fruit simply by hearing. And this is what Dhruva Maharaj is actually explaining here, that as we spoke of yesterday, bless me that I may associate with great devotees who engage in a transcendental loving service constantly, as the waves of a river constantly flow. Such transcendental devotees are completely situated in uncontaminated state of life, and by this easy process, I'm becoming mad after hearing about your transcendental qualities and pastimes, which are eternally existent. And then in today's verse he says, O Lord, who have a lotus navel, if a person happens to associate with a devotee whose heart always hankers after your lotus feet, seeking always their fragrance, he's never attached to the material body or in a bodily relationship to offspring, friends, home, wealth, and wife, which are very, very dear to materialistic persons. Indeed, he does not care for them. Almost sounds like does not care for them, that means he doesn't give a darn. Doesn't care for them, it simply means that his attachment for Krishna is so strong that he won't allow his connection with them to give up his hearing and chanting. Basically, as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains, that his determination is greater for hearing and chanting than for all these other activities. And as we read yesterday, we read that verse in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, that it's not an immediate process. And we actually read that verse, what is that? Shrinvan Bhagavatam Krishna Avatara Katamritam. We read that verse that Narada Muni spoke to Yudhishthira Maharaj. He said that if one regularly hears the Srimad Bhagavatam and associates with the devotees, then gradually what happens is that one begins to awaken gradually, not immediately, but gradually. He awakens from a dream. So in the same way, and he becomes gradually detached from these activities, which are the source of so much suffering. Source of so much of his suffering, because of attachment. So it's not that one doesn't care, one is indifferent. In fact, I'll end with one very beautiful quote I oftentimes quote from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, which he really describes it in the most digestible way. On device. Here it is. Excuse me. We should see this material world and everything in it as full of ingredients for the Lord's service. Everything in this world is meant for Krishna's service. The day when we can look at the world like this and become liberated from the material conception, we will be able to see the material world as the spiritual world, Goloka. We should treat all women as Krishna's beloveds. They are to be enjoyed by him. Do not look at them with an enjoying spirit. They are meant to be enjoyed by Krishna, never by the living entities. Treat your father and mother as Krishna's father and mother. Instead of considering your children your servants, treat them as friends of child Krishna. Then you will not see the material world everywhere, but Goloka.
Can you repeat this, Maharaj?
The last one was everything was nice.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
Is that from Amritavani?
From Ritavani. He answers the question, how should we treat the material world? We should see this material world and everything in it as full of ingredients for the Lord's service. Everything in this world is meant for Krishna's service. The day when we can look at the world like this and become liberated from the material conception, we will be able to see the material world as the spiritual world, Goloka. We should treat all women as Krishna's beloveds. They are to be enjoyed by him. Do not look at them with an enjoying spirit. They are meant to be enjoyed by Krishna, never by the living entities. Treat your father and mother as Krishna's father and mother. Instead of considering your children your servants, treat them as friends of child Krishna. Then you will not see the material world everywhere, but Goloka. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to end, if it's okay, because we have programs. And, if you have questions, you can ask the Madhavananda this afternoon.
Nail him.
I didn't think I was going to get nailed. I didn't expect to be nailed. I tried to stick to the words of the previous triers.
That end quote really wrapped it up.